The crisp morning air of October was shattered by the sharp buzz of my phone. I picked it up to see a text from my father, Richard. "Clara, your mother and I have decided it is best if you do not attend the anniversary gala this weekend. There will be influential politicians and senior partners present. We cannot afford the embarrassment of explaining your little catering hobby to our colleagues. Stay home. My name is Clara Vance. I am 34 years old, and once upon a time, those words would have broken me. Instead, a slow, icy smile spread across my face. I sat back in my leather chair, staring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office that overlooked the rolling green hills of my property. My father, the esteemed Judge Richard Vance, was worried about my little catering hobby ruining his perfect night. What he did not know was that his perfect night was entirely in my hands, literally. I turned my attention back to the glowing screen of my laptop. The internal booking system for my business was open. I am the sole owner and founder of the Sterling Estate, a $25 million luxury resort and premium event venue that caters to the absolute elite of the country. We host celebrity weddings, corporate retreats for Fortune 500 companies, and, apparently, my parents' 40th anniversary and retirement gala. Just minutes before his cruel text, my director of operations, David, had flagged a massive VIP booking made by a third-party concierge service. The client name had been carefully hidden under a corporate shell, but the billing details matched my father's senior assistant. They had paid an exorbitant premium to secure the Grand Pavilion on just a week's notice, completely unaware that the money was flowing directly into the bank account of the daughter they had just disowned. The sheer irony of it all was intoxicating. For years, my father and my older brother, Marcus, a senior partner at a top-tier corporate law firm, had relentlessly mocked my decision to drop out of law school. They called me a failure, a disgrace to the Vance family legacy. They thought I was still struggling, flipping burgers in a rented food truck. They had absolutely no idea that I had built an empire from the ground up. My hand hovered over the keyboard. I could have hit the cancel button right then and there. I could have left them scrambling for a venue with nowhere to go, destroying my father's precious retirement announcement and his flawless upper-class image in one swift move. It would have been incredibly easy, but easy was not my style. They wanted to shut me out to protect their reputation. They wanted to pretend I did not exist. I picked up the phone on my desk and pressed a single button. "David," I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "That VIP booking for this weekend, the Vance anniversary?" "Yes, Clara. We have them confirmed for the Grand Pavilion. Do you want me to cancel it? I saw the billing name." David knew my history. He knew the bad blood. "No," I replied. "Do not cancel it. In fact, I want you to upgrade their package to the platinum tier. Give them the best vintage champagne, the imported caviar, the crystal chandeliers, spare absolutely no expense. Let them think they are the undisputed kings of the world." David paused on the other end of the line, clearly confused. "Clara, are you sure? That is thousands of dollars in complimentary upgrades for people who do not even want you there." "Oh, I am sure," I said, leaning closer to the receiver, my pulse drumming a steady, powerful rhythm. "Because I will be attending that party, David, and when I make my entrance, I want my estate to look absolutely flawless." I hung up the phone. My father wanted to protect his legacy from me. He was about to learn that I was the one holding the keys to the castle. The game had just begun, and they had already lost. The afternoon sun bathed the Sterling Estate in a golden hue as David and I walked through the Grand Pavilion. The space was a masterpiece of modern architecture mixed with classic elegance. Vaulted ceilings, imported Italian marble floors, and massive crystal chandeliers that caught the fading light perfectly. A small army of my staff was already at work, arranging the centerpieces and polishing the silver to a mirror shine. "The floral arrangements have arrived," David said, checking his tablet. "White orchids and white roses, just as the client requested. And the executive chef is finalizing the tasting menu for the platinum package." I ran my fingers over the edge of a mahogany table. Everything was flawless. Everything was expensive. My father always demanded the absolute best, but he never wanted to pay the price. Now he was unknowingly paying me. "Make sure the seating chart is exactly as they submitted it," I instructed, scanning the room. "But add one chair, an unassigned seat at the far end of the room, near the shadows. I do not want to be seated at the head table with the family. I want to watch them from a distance." David looked at me, a mixture of respect and concern in his eyes. "You are really going through with this. You are going to let them treat you like an outcast in your own kingdom." "They need to feel secure, David," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "They need to believe they are untouchable. It makes the fall so much steeper." As David walked away to coordinate with the kitchen staff, my mind drifted back 7 years. The memories hit me like a bitter winter wind. It was Thanksgiving dinner, and the air in my parents' dining room was thick with tension. I had just announced that I was withdrawing from my final year of law school to pursue my culinary and hospitality business. I had bought a used food truck with every penny of my savings. My father had thrown his linen napkin onto the table, his face red with rage. "A food truck?" he had bellowed, the veins in his neck popping against his stiff collar. "I am a federal judge, and my daughter is going to be selling street food like a common peddler? You are throwing your life away, Clara. You are a disgrace to this family's name." My mother, Susan, had just stared at her porcelain plate, swirling her expensive wine, refusing to meet my eyes. Her silence had been a betrayal in its own right, a quiet agreement with every harsh word my father spat at me. But it was Marcus who had delivered the deepest cut. My older brother, fresh off his promotion to senior partner at his corporate firm, had leaned back in his chair. He looked at me with a smirk that I would never forget. "Let her go, Dad," Marcus had said, his voice dripping with condescension. "She always was too weak for the courtroom. Let Clara play chef in her little grease trap. When she goes bankrupt in a year, she will come crawling back, begging for a job as my paralegal." I had walked out of that house with nothing but my pride and a burning desperation to prove them wrong. I worked 18-hour days. I slept on the floor of my food truck because I could not afford rent. I fought for every catering contract, every bank loan, every investor until that single truck turned into a fleet. That fleet funded my first premium restaurant. And that restaurant laid the foundation for the Sterling estate. They never called. They never asked how I was doing. To them, I was dead weight. A dark mark on the pristine Vance family record that they actively tried to erase. I snapped back to the present, the sound of crystal glasses clinking, pulling me out of the past. The grand pavilion was almost ready for the event of the season. "Clara!" David called out, returning with his clipboard. The concierge service called. "Judge Vance requested that the estate owner be present tonight to ensure everything runs smoothly. He wants to personally thank you for the complimentary VIP upgrades." A dark, sharp chuckle escaped my lips. "Oh, the owner will certainly be there. But tell the entire staff that under no circumstances is anyone to address me as the boss tonight. Treat me like any other guest. No special treatment, no bowing. If they ask, I am just Clara." "Playing the long game," David noted, a slight smile forming on his face. "The longest," I said. I left the pavilion and headed to my private suite on the top floor of the main estate. I walked into my walk-in closet and bypassed the soft, floral dresses my mother used to force me to wear to fit her mold of a perfect daughter. Instead, I pulled out a custom-tailored, sharp emerald green suit. It was bold, unapologetic, and screamed authority. It was my armor. I laid it out on the bed, staring at the crisp lines of the fabric. My father had explicitly told me to stay home to avoid embarrassing him. He wanted to curate a picture-perfect reality where his successful lawyer son was his only heir and his legacy was untarnished. Tomorrow night, I was going to shatter that reality into a million pieces, and I was going to do it with a smile. The grand doors of the pavilion opened at exactly 7 o'clock, welcoming the absolute elite of the city. Senators, corporate executives, and high-profile judges mingled under the glowing light of my crystal chandeliers. Waiters in crisp white uniforms glided effortlessly through the crowd, offering trays of beluga caviar and vintage Dom Perignon. It was a scene of unparalleled wealth and prestige, carefully curated to stroke my father's massive ego. Standing by the entrance, I watched from the shadows as Richard held court. He looked every bit the distinguished retiring judge in his tailored tuxedo. His chest puffed out as he laughed at a joke made by the mayor. My mother, Susan, stood dutifully by his side, draped in diamonds and wearing a forced smile, nodding politely at the wives of powerful men. A few feet away, my brother Marcus was working the room, swirling a glass of scotch and loudly recounting his latest corporate victory to a circle of captive listeners. They were in their element. They were untouchable, until I walked in. I stepped into the light, the emerald green suit commanding immediate attention against the sea of safe, muted evening gowns. The sharp click of my heels on the marble floor seemed to echo above the classical string quartet playing in the corner. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator that had already cornered its prey. The reaction was instantaneous. As I moved deeper into the room, conversations faltered, heads turned. I was not a stranger to this crowd. Many of them remembered me as the disgraced Vance daughter who had thrown her elite education away. I saw the whispers start, hands covering mouths, eyes darting from me to my father. Richard froze. His booming laugh died in his throat and the color drained from his face. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped, revealing pure panic. Beside him, my mother gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. Before my father could excuse himself, Marcus was already moving toward me, his jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to snap. He intercepted me halfway across the room, grabbing my elbow with a vice-like grip and dragging me toward a quiet alcove near the kitchen doors. "What are you doing here?" Marcus hissed, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. His eyes darted around nervously to see if anyone was watching. "Dad told you to stay away? Are you trying to humiliate us on purpose?" I pulled my arm out of his grasp, smoothly adjusting the sleeve of my jacket. "It is a family anniversary, Marcus. I am family. Why would I miss it?" Before he could respond, my father appeared. His face was a mask of cold fury, his voice a lethal whisper. "Clara, you are leaving this instant. I will not let you ruin the most important night of my career with your desperate need for attention. Do you have any idea how much this venue cost? How important these people are?" "I am well aware of the cost, Richard," I said smoothly, refusing to call him Dad. The use of his first name made him flinch. "But if you cause a scene and drag me out by security, the mayor and the press will definitely have something to talk about tomorrow. Is that the retirement headline you want?" He stared at me, his chest heaving as he weighed his options. He knew I was right. A public ejection would ruin his flawless facade. He leaned in, his voice dripping with venom. "Fine, you stay. But you will not speak to any of my colleagues. You will sit at the overflow table in the back, keep your mouth shut, and eat whatever scraps they serve you. Do you understand?" "Perfectly," I replied, offering a chilling smile. Marcus scoffed, looking me up and down. "Nice suit, Clara. Did you rent it with the tips from your food truck? Enjoy the free meal. It is probably the best food you will eat all year." I did not argue. I simply nodded and walked over to the small, unassigned table tucked away in the shadows near the back of the room. It was the exact seat I had instructed David to arrange for me. From here, I had a perfect view of the main stage and the head table where my family sat, trying to pretend the awkward encounter had never happened. The first course was served, seared scallops with a truffle foam. It was one of my signature creations. I watched as the guests took their first bites, their eyes widening in delight. I saw the mayor lean over to my father, complimenting the extraordinary quality of the catering. My father beamed, puffing his chest out again, taking credit for selecting such a prestigious venue. "The owner of this estate is a genius," I heard a senator say to Marcus at the head table. "The level of sophistication is unmatched. You must introduce us, Marcus. I need them for my campaign gala." "Of course, Senator," Marcus bragged, taking a sip of his wine. "We have the best connections. The owner is a visionary." I sat in the shadows, slowly turning my wine glass by the stem. A visionary. That was a new word for them to use on me. The tension in my chest uncoiled, replaced by a dark, overwhelming sense of anticipation. They were eating my food. They were sitting under my roof. They were praising my genius. And they had absolutely no idea the trap was about to spring shut. The final plates were cleared, leaving behind a room filled with satisfied murmurs and the clinking of crystal glasses. The moment had arrived. The lights dimmed slightly, leaving a warm, dramatic spotlight on the grand stage at the front of the pavilion. My father, Richard, stood up, buttoning his tuxedo jacket. The room erupted into polite, deferential applause as he made his way to the podium. He adjusted his glasses, looking out over the sea of powerful politicians, judges, and corporate titans. He did not look at the back table. To him, I was already erased. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Richard began, his deep baritone voice echoing through the state-of-the-art sound system I had personally installed. 40 years of marriage to my beautiful wife, Susan, and 40 years on the bench. It has been a life built on a foundation of excellence, tradition, and legacy. A legacy I am proud to see carried on by my son, Marcus, who is already making waves as a senior partner. Applause swelled again. Marcus raised his glass from the head table, a smug smile plastered across his face. "We chose this venue," Richard continued, gesturing expansively to the crystal chandeliers above, "because it represents the pinnacle of achievement and refinement. It is a testament to what hard work and proper pedigree can build." I took a slow sip of my water. Proper pedigree. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. When Richard finished his speech, Marcus took the microphone for a toast. He praised my father, praised their law firm, and then his eyes scanned the room, landing on me in the shadows. A cruel, arrogant glint flashed in his eyes. He could not resist. He had to twist the knife. He had to prove his superiority to the entire room before the night ended. "You know, we speak a lot about success tonight," Marcus said, his voice carrying a mocking edge. "But we also have to remember to be humble. My little sister, Clara, is sitting in the back tonight. She decided the legal world was too tough for her. Now she runs a small catering business. Clara, why do not you come up here and say a few words? Tell us how those food trucks are doing." A heavy, awkward silence fell over the room. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. My mother buried her face in her hands. My father glared at Marcus, angry that he had drawn attention to me, but Marcus just smirked, waiting for me to crumble under the weight of public humiliation. Instead of shrinking, I stood up. I smoothed the lapels of my emerald green suit and walked slowly down the center aisle. Every eye in the room was fixed on me. The silence was deafening, broken only by the steady, confident click of my heels. I did not rush. I let the anticipation build until the air in the room felt ready to snap. I stepped onto the stage and calmly took the microphone from Marcus. He leaned in and whispered, "Keep it short, food truck." I turned to the crowd, my posture straight, my expression unreadable. I looked directly at the mayor, then at the senator who had praised the venue, and finally my gaze landed on my father. "Good evening, everyone," I started, my voice clear and unwavering. "My brother is right. We should talk about success, and we should talk about this magnificent venue that my father so highly praised just moments ago." I looked off stage and gave a subtle nod to David, who was standing by the soundboard. "My father mentioned that this estate represents the pinnacle of hard work," I continued. "What he failed to mention is whose hard work it actually is." Behind me, the massive digital screen that spanned the back of the stage flickered to life. The guests gasped. There, in towering, brilliant gold letters, was the logo of the Sterling Estate, and right below it, the text read, "Clara Vance, founder and chief executive officer." The color instantly drained from Marcus's face. He stumbled backward, staring at the screen as if it were a ghost. In the front row, my father gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning pure white. His jaw went completely slack. "Welcome to my home," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence like a diamond blade. "Welcome to the Sterling Estate, a $25 million empire, built entirely from that single food truck my family loved to mock." A collective wave of shock rippled through the elite crowd. The whispers erupted into a chaotic buzz. The senator who had just asked Marcus for an introduction to the owner stared at him with absolute disgust. I turned to look at my father, leaning slightly into the microphone. You paid a massive premium to book this room tonight, Richard. You tried to ban me from attending a party hosted on my own property. You told me my presence would embarrass you. You told me I was a failure. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink into the minds of every powerful person in that room. The humiliation I had felt for 7 years was now entirely theirs to bear. But look around, I said, sweeping my hand across the grand pavilion. I own the walls you are sitting inside. I employ the chefs who cooked your flawless meal. I built the legacy you are trying to use to impress your friends. You wanted the owner to come out and make sure everything was running smoothly? Well, here I am. Marcus stepped forward, his voice a frantic, desperate hiss. Clara, stop it. Turn that screen off. You are lying. This is a trick. A trick? I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed off the marble walls. Check your billing statements, Marcus. Your firm's money is sitting in my corporate accounts right now. I even gave you the platinum upgrade on the house. The crowd began to turn on them. The mayor leaned away from my parents' table, shaking his head. Several guests began murmuring about the sheer arrogance and hypocrisy of the Vance family. My father tried to stand, to take control, to say something to salvage his ruined reputation, but his voice failed him. The great, intimidating Judge Vance was left utterly speechless, completely dismantled by the daughter he had thrown away. I set the microphone gently down on the podium. I had not yelled. I had not lost my temper. I had simply presented the facts, and the facts had destroyed them. I walked off the stage, the silence of the room breaking into a wave of hushed, frantic whispers. I did not look back at my father, who was now slumped in his chair, or at Marcus, whose face was buried in his hands. I simply walked through the parted crowd, my emerald suit catching the light, and made my way toward the exit. But before I could reach the heavy oak doors, the senator stepped directly into my path. He extended his hand, a warm, genuine smile on his face. "Ms. Vance," he said loudly enough for the head table to hear, "that was the most remarkable display of grace under fire I have ever witnessed. I am hosting a massive campaign fundraiser next month, and I will accept no other venue but the Sterling Estate. My office will call you on Monday." "I look forward to it, Senator," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. As I walked out of the grand pavilion, I heard the sound of chairs scraping against the marble floor. People were leaving early. The grand retirement gala, meant to cement Richard Vance's legacy as a pillar of society, was ending in an unmitigated disaster. They had tried to lock me out in the cold, but instead, they had locked themselves in a cage of their own making. The fallout was swift and absolute. By Monday morning, the story had leaked to the local press and spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles. The headline of the leading business journal read, "Judge Vance's legacy eclipsed by the daughter he denied." The article detailed the entire night, exposing how the Vance family had tried to hide their self-made millionaire daughter, only to be outclassed at their own party. The consequences for them were devastating. The elite class of our city despised public embarrassment above all else. Richard's retirement, which was supposed to be a graceful exit into high society reverence, became a cautionary tale of arrogance. His former colleagues distanced themselves. The country club quietly canceled his upcoming speaking engagements. His flawless reputation was in ruins. Marcus fared even worse. The senator, disgusted by Marcus's lack of integrity and cruel public behavior, pulled his massive corporate account from Marcus's law firm. Without his biggest client, the firm's partners held an emergency meeting. Marcus was stripped of his senior partner track. The promotion he had gloated about was gone in the blink of an eye, replaced by the humiliating task of rebuilding his client roster from scratch. Then came the phone calls. For 7 years, my phone had been completely silent. Now it was ringing off the hook. First, it was my father. He left 4 voicemails in a single afternoon. His tone had shifted from commanding and cruel to desperate and pleading. "Clara, please," his recorded voice crackled through my phone speaker. "This has gotten out of hand. The press is tearing us apart. We are family. We need to sit down, take a photo together, and issue a joint statement. You need to fix this. I deleted the message before it even finished playing. He did not want a relationship. He wanted a public relations shield. Then came the text from Marcus, oscillating between anger and begging. You ruined my career, Clara. Call me back. We need to talk. I am sorry, okay? Just call me. I blocked his number without a second thought. Finally, my mother called. I watched her name flash on the screen for a long moment. The woman who had stood by in silence while her husband and son tore my dreams apart. I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail. I did not listen to it. I did not need to. Their shame was their own burden to carry, and I refused to let them unpack it in my life. 2 weeks later, the Sterling estate was fully booked for the next 3 years. The publicity from the gala had catapulted my business into the stratosphere. I was no longer just a successful entrepreneur. I was a local legend. The public loved the story of the underdog who had built an empire and defeated her bullies with pure, undeniable success. I stood on the private balcony of my penthouse office, wrapping a cashmere shawl around my shoulders against the crisp November breeze. Below me, the estate was alive with activity. A high-profile celebrity wedding was being set up by the lake, the staff moving with practiced perfection. David walked out onto the balcony, handing me a freshly signed contract for our new expansion, a second luxury resort in Aspen. Are you ready for the next chapter, Clara? David asked, a proud smile on his face. I looked out over the sprawling green hills, the crystal-clear lake, and the empire I had built from absolutely nothing. For years, I had thought that true victory would be forcing my family to respect me. I thought the ultimate prize was making them admit they were wrong. But as I stood there, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, I realized the truth. True victory was looking at the spectacular life I had created and realizing I no longer cared what they thought at all. They were a chapter I had already finished reading. Yes, David, I smiled, breathing in the cold, free air. I am more than ready. 1 year later, the biting cold of the Aspen wind whipped against the floor-to-ceiling glass of my newest property, the Sterling Summit. The grand opening was the most exclusive event of the winter season in Colorado. The massive stone fireplace roared in the center of the Grand Lodge, casting a warm golden glow over the billionaires, tech moguls, and Hollywood elite who had flown in just to be seen at my resort. I stood by the balcony overlooking the snow-covered peaks, swirling a glass of sparkling water. The expansion had cost $50 million, and it had been fully booked for the next 2 years before the doors even opened. The Vance family name, once something I felt I had to live up to, was now entirely eclipsed by my own brand. Everything is running perfectly, Clara, David said, stepping up beside me in a sharp charcoal suit. The press is already calling it the greatest luxury destination in North America. Good, I replied, taking a sip. Make sure the valets are ready for the departures. The storm is picking up. There is just one thing, David hesitated, his voice dropping to a low, serious register. Security just flagged 2 uninvited guests at the front gates. They slipped past the outer perimeter by claiming they were your legal representation. I did not need to ask who it was. The familiar, icy grip of irritation flared in my chest, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Let them in, I said softly. Bring them to the private study. I will deal with them myself. I walked through the bustling lobby, the polite smiles and nods from my elite guests parting the crowd for me. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the private study. Standing by the leather sofas, looking completely out of place and visibly shivering from the cold, were my father and Marcus. They looked remarkably different from the arrogant men who had tried to banish me to the shadows a year ago. Richard looked older, his posture stooped, the commanding presence of the great Judge Vance completely gone. Marcus looked haggard, the dark circles under his eyes revealing the toll of losing his senior partner track and scraping the bottom of the barrel for clients. Clara, my father started, taking a step forward. He tried to muster that old authoritative tone, but it cracked. Judge Vance? "Marcus?" I greeted them, stopping behind my massive mahogany desk. I did not offer them a seat. "You have exactly 3 minutes before my security team physically throws you out into the blizzard. Speak." Marcus sneered, trying to mask his desperation with his old arrogance. He reached into his briefcase and slammed a thick manila folder onto my desk. "We are not here to beg, Clara," Marcus spat. "We are here for what is ours. That little stunt you pulled last year ruined Dad's reputation and destroyed my career. We are suing you for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and loss of future earnings. We are seeking $10 million. Settle right now, or I will drag you through the courts for the next decade." I stared at the folder. Then I looked up at Marcus. I did not blink. I did not shout. I just started to laugh. It was not a hysterical laugh. It was a dark, genuine, pitying laugh that echoed against the walls of the study. "You think this is funny?" Richard demanded, his face flushing red. "He is serious, Clara. You destroyed this family. You owe us." I stopped laughing and leaned forward, resting my hands on the desk. "I destroyed the family?" "No, Richard. I just held up a mirror. You destroyed yourselves." I picked up the manila folder, barely glancing at the cover, and casually tossed it into the roaring fireplace next to my desk. The flames caught the paper instantly, turning Marcus's empty threats into ash. "Are you insane?" Marcus yelled, lunging forward before stopping himself as my hand reached for the security button under the desk. "I dropped out of law school, Marcus, but I did not forget how the law works," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Defamation requires a false statement. Everything I said that night was the absolute truth. You paid me. I hosted you. I own the company. There is no judge in this country who would take your case, especially since half the judicial system was sitting in that room watching you make fools of yourselves." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off, my voice sharp like cracked ice. "But let us talk about lawsuits," I continued, opening my top drawer and pulling out a sleek black folder. I slid it across the desk toward them. "My legal team, headed by the current managing partner of your former firm, Marcus, has been keeping very close tabs on you. If you ever attempt to contact me again, if you ever set foot on my property again, or if you ever mention my name in public, I will countersue you for corporate harassment and trespassing. I have a $1 billion legal fund. I will bury you both in so much litigation that your grandchildren will be paying my legal fees." Richard stared at the black folder as if it were a venomous snake. His hands shook. He finally realized the absolute truth. He had absolutely no power here. I was not his little girl anymore. I was a titan, and he was an insect in my house. "You are a monster, Clara," my father whispered, his voice cracking with defeat. "No," I replied, standing up straight, my emerald green blazer catching the firelight. "I am the consequence of your actions. Now get out of my resort." I pressed the button under my desk. Less than 5 seconds later, the heavy oak doors swung open, and 4 massive security guards in black suits stepped into the room. "Escort these men off the mountain," I instructed the guards without breaking eye contact with my family. "If they resist, let the local authorities handle them." Marcus glared at me, his eyes full of venom and regret, but he said nothing. He turned on his heel and stormed out. Richard lingered for a fraction of a second, looking at me with a mixture of sorrow and fear. For a brief moment, I thought he might finally apologize. But the silence stretched, and eventually he turned and followed his son into the cold. I watched the heavy doors close behind them, sealing them out of my life forever. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth. I walked over to the window, watching the 2 small figures trudge through the heavy snow toward the exit gates, disappearing into the whiteout. The Vance family thought they could dictate my worth. They thought they could rewrite my story to fit their perfect narrative, but they had fundamentally misunderstood who was holding the pen. I picked up my glass of sparkling water, took a long, refreshing sip, and walked back out into the lobby. The music was playing, the glasses were clinking, and my empire was waiting. The storm raged outside, but inside my walls I was the undisputed queen.